Soulful Sauna, Stories of Self-Mastery. Thank you for joining us. It is you, the viewer, that makes this podcast. Your host, Juliette Noske, and her guests are here to share stories of self-mastery, to inspire you and ignite the power of positive change on your own journey. Thank you for being with us. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Soulful Sauna podcast. Today, my very special guest is Darren Eden, and for the last 24 years, Darren's soul passion has been mastering the principles of imagination and intuition. And during that time, he has had the privilege of working with extraordinary people from around the world who he has taught to master their intuitive wisdom, bringing him immense joy to serve each person to transform their life into a beautiful work of art. He currently lives in Devon with his wife, Joanna, and son, Atlas, where he runs the Mystery School and plays and enjoys music, as well as immersing himself in the magic and mystery of Dartmoor. Welcome, Darren.
Thank you, Juliette. Lovely to be here with you.
Thank you for coming.
It's a pleasure.
And it would be lovely to, first of all, hear how you came to live where you live now.
That's a great question. You'll find that I'll answer most questions with intuition. Because that's the thing about intuition, it reveals what you love. And we basically went, where would we love to live? And it literally emerged intuitively that Devon is where we would love to be. So, and then we just took action on that, and here we are. It's really that simple. It's the great thing about intuition, is literally reveals what you love and leads you to what you love. So it really is a magical place to live. Yeah.
Yeah. So how did you do that together then? You tuned into that together?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, in fact, we were tuning in where to live when we were still in Australia, because we moved to the UK about 15 years ago, no, 16 years ago, 2008. And we were tuning in then to where we would love to be, because Joanna is English and she grew up in the north, and she didn't really want to move back to Cheshire where she grew up. So, it literally just emerged that symbolically that this is where we would love to be. And it's interesting too, because when you lead with intuition, people show up. Like I call them like heralds. They show up to support you and serve you going for what you love. And an English friend of ours who was in Australia at the time, she said, well, if I was to live in two places, I would either live in the Lake District or in Totnes. And we went, oh, I don't know about the Lake District, that doesn't ring, but Totnes kind of resonates with what we were getting symbolically. And then so we headed to Totnes, and it just happens to be in Devon. But we didn't actually settle in the town of Totnes. We ended up being just outside. But it is just stunning here. Yeah. So that was kind of like the magic that happened that brought us here.
That's wonderful. Yeah. And I love that, how you call them heralds, those people that turn up to guide you on your way. I often talk about listening out for the messages that are coming to us, because they come in all different ways, don't they? As well as through people, they also come, you know, for example, my pets as well. They've guided me a lot on my way.
Absolutely, yeah. Pets make great heralds for sure. Yeah.
And so, can you tell us what's a crazy but true fact about you, Darren?
Yeah, well, I think it's an interesting question, because I think it's true, but I guess it's crazy. But, you know, when I turned 50, I really kind of, having crossed that threshold, I really made the choice to take up music and play music and really go down that journey of playing and creating music. particularly since, I've kind of dabbled in and out of playing music over the years, and whereas it's not something I've really committed to, and particularly having spent a lot of time in my younger working years in the corporate world, I didn't have a direct relationship with music at all, and didn't think I had a musical bone in my body. I enjoyed music, but didn't even think I had a sense of rhythm. But again, it's like my intuition that has revealed that music is a big part of what I love, and there's always a threshold to cross as well, those kind of significant ages can be significant thresholds as well. And so I just crossed that threshold and went, what would I love? I went, yeah, I'd love to commit myself to music. And it's just been an extraordinary journey. I've just loved it so much, really. It's just amazing.
And what kind of music do you play, or what instruments? And
I play the guitar. I play the acoustic and electric guitar. I've kind of dabbled with other instruments, but they're my instruments of choice. And I play all sorts of music. A lot of it's led by music that I would love, music that I love listening to, music that I'd love to learn. And that could be blues, it could be folk, it could be rock, jazz. Like, it really doesn't matter. I'm very, very much led by songs that I would love to learn and play. And I've just started going down the journey of creating my own songs as well, which is fantastic.
So when you talk a lot about, obviously, intuition and imagination, and having worked with many, many wise people along the way, how would you explain to someone out there who wants to start tuning in more with their intuition and imagination?
Well, it's a good question, because I think the first thing to assume is that we're all intuitive and that we all have an imagination. I think that's the first thing to assume, and that it's there and it's within all of us. Because, like not thinking I had any sense of rhythm, I also didn't think I had an intuitive bone in my body either. Because we kind of unconsciously live from our beliefs and assumptions, and they kind of they create a separation from this inherent gift that we all have. And they're actually really simple. Like, if you work with the premise that your imagination or intuition is inherent within you, it's just that the volume is low compared to our thoughts and feelings, because our thoughts and feelings come from our beliefs and assumptions, and they can drown out that kind of soft, more subtle voice of our intuition. And over the years, I've just developed a really effortless method to help people lower the volume on their thoughts and feelings and increase the volume on their imagination and intuition. And it's just brilliant when people do that, because instead of things suddenly being impossible or not having any clarity on a decision or a choice or whatever, or life path, suddenly their intuition reveals it to them. It's just like, oh, okay. It's just amazing how it works.
And having been on the transformation course with you, I think was it 9 months or
8 months?
Yeah, 8 months. 8 months. Yeah, I completely get that. And having experienced it myself, as well as seeing all of those around me going off and doing things which I guess most people might say, wow, that's a bit wild and crazy. But actually, when you're in it, it just seems like the natural way to move forward. But there are still doubts, though, aren't there? Because sometimes you make a decision and then kind of the doubting Thomas kind of comes in a little bit and says, really? You're going to move all that way, for example, or you're going to take that huge step and change your career in that way. So how do you deal with those doubts in your mind?
Yeah, it's a really good question, actually, because even though you can lower the volume on your thoughts and feelings and your doubts and fears and increase the volume on your imagination, intuition, it can reveal what you love. Before you know it, the volume has just come back up again. Because our thoughts and feelings come from these beliefs and assumptions, they really form the foundation of what I call our identity or our ego. And so it only takes the slightest bit of reaction for the volume to come back up again. And it's very understandable, particularly if you're going down a path that you haven't been down before. Your intuition's saying, go there, and it really rings true. And it's all clear water, so to speak. You're going to have doubts and fears. You're like, oh, I'm not sure. But that's what's so great about having direct access to your imagination and intuition, because the doubts and fears create a threshold. And I like talking in terms of thresholds as well. And what we love is always on the other side of a threshold. And what your imagination and intuition can do is help you realize that those doubts and fears are just coming from beliefs and assumptions that have been triggered. And that we can effortlessly then part that veil, turn that threshold into a veil and cross it. And then we're away. It's almost like, I'm just thinking of a metaphor of surfing, not that I'm a surfer at all, but like doubts and fears can be like having to get through the waves that are breaking, But then if you're focused and you focus your imagination and you get on the other side of the breaking waves, then you're in clear water. Then you're ready to start having this exhilarating experience of surfing, So, as an example that suddenly comes to mind.
Yeah, I love that. And talking of surfing and water, I'm going to take you on a bit of a twist and a turn, as this is a Soulful Sauna podcast. Do you have an interesting sauna story for us?
Well, yeah. I don't spend a lot of time in saunas, but I used to spend a lot of time in sweat lodges. I used to do a lot of sweat lodges. Prior to kind of getting into the whole intuitive path, I did a lot of exploration of different forms of spirituality, and one of them was Native American spirituality, and learnt a lot about Lakota rituals and Lakota sweat lodges. And then when I started running my own intuitive trainings, I would incorporate, I'd created my own sweat lodges, and kind of incorporated my own premises along with some of the Lakota premises. And I would do a kind of a beginning sweat lodge at the beginning of a training, like as a kind of opening ceremony, my own little Olympic opening ceremony, it was great because sweat lodges are very sacred places, and it kind of created that space for this kind of magical training that we used to do. And then we'd have a completion sweat lodge at the end. And I framed that up because it was at the end of a training that I was running in Byron Bay, where I did a completion sweat lodge at the end of a training. And that sweat lodge just happened to be on Halloween, on the 31st of October. And the great thing about sweat lodges too is they create this wonderful space where you can be very sensitive to your imagination and intuition and very sensitive to subtle energies, And one of the things that we used to do in Australia is kind of acknowledge the ancestors of the land, and we call in the ancestors of the land. And just as I did that, I literally felt this presence enter my heart. And and this is what's so great about intuition. You can pick up on these finer vibrations, And it was just so obvious that presence was the vibration or the essence of my son. And Joanna and I, we weren't intending to have a child at the time. And Joanna was in the sweat lodge as well, because she'd just completed that training as well. And she felt his presence. And basically we went home and made love, which was pretty cool. And she literally felt his presence leave me and into her on that night. It was profound. And then we just, went about our life, and then she found out that she missed a period and found out that she was pregnant, which was fantastic. But even at the time, we didn't quite link it to that night. It's interesting, how thoughts and feelings come up and you kind of forget. But then we had a scan at 20 weeks. We only had one scan. And we were living in Byron Bay at the time, and the radiologist said, they often ask, do you want to know what the sex of the child is? And we said, well, you can tell us, but we know it's a boy. And I'm like, okay, yes, it's a boy. And this was back in 2004. And they said, we have the technology now where we can also tell you the approximate date of conception. And we just looked at each other and went, It was the 31st of October. This lady was just floored. And in fact, actually, before that, in the lodge, because I was also acknowledging that it was Halloween, and the guy who owned the land, who was the custodian of the land, he said, well, it's actually Beltane in Australia. Yeah, that's an important point because it's Halloween in the Northern Hemisphere on the 31st of October, but Beltane in the Southern Hemisphere at that time. And it was interesting because when he said that, because Beltane is a celebration of fertility, and it was actually then that he entered my heart. It was amazing. And what's amazing is that after the radiologist picked us up on the floor, we obviously Joanna had a great pregnancy. We had a home birth, and as Atlas started to grow up, he just naturally had this amazing affinity to Halloween. And he's before we got to explain how he was conceived, and he loves Halloween just as much as he loves his birthday and Christmas. Like his favorite movie when he was really young was The Night Before Christmas, the Tim Burton Disney animation. So it's really amazing the magic that happened. So that's my sauna story.
How wonderful, yeah. And that you could actually tune into, to calling your son in, or him calling you, really, in a way.
Yeah, he suddenly appeared. Yeah, I didn't call him in. That's a good point, actually. Yeah, he just made his presence known. It's very magical. I'm glad you asked that question. It really made me reflect on because that's absolutely my finest creation, and just like that's how it's a really good example of how we create naturally when we're living and creating from our imagination or intuition, because we are all incredible magical beings.
Yeah.
It's an example of that.
And so with your son as well, how do you explore and play with intuition and imagination? Because that, I can imagine that's a beautiful dance.
Yeah, very much so. Well, him growing up, he went to school initially when he was 5, but it didn't serve his heart, his spirit, and literally we just took him out of school and we just went, that's it. Joanna took the initiative on of home educating him, but we just wanted him to love learning and really wanted to foster his imagination at the same time. And so we basically created an environment that enabled that. And so he would just learn whatever he would love to learn, and basically nurtured that. And what was really great is that what emerged is that he really loves writing, and he really loves channeling his imagination into writing. So we've just fostered that, and he has just become the most extraordinary writer, which kind of led to him entering these very prestigious writing awards and then winning them. He won the BBC Young Writers Award last year, preceded by the Young Walter Scott Prize Award. In fact, he's going to London next week. He's been shortlisted for the Wilbur-Smith Foundation Adventure Prize. So we'll find out if he wins that one. But, that's all wonderful, to win these kind of writing prizes. But it really is as a result of the freedom that he has to dive into his imagination and to express that. It's just so rich. It's amazing.
Yeah. I think also it's such a beautiful way because, a lot of people, when they think about taking their child out of school, which I've had a conversation a lot about this with different people, they are concerned about what they'll miss out on because there are certain subjects that we feel that, our children should have because they won't get along without them. But then if we look back in our own lives, there's a lot that we've never actually used. And, if you can focus on their strengths and what lights them up, then I'm sure, whatever else they need will come along with that. And that's just a beautiful example, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree.
Yeah.
You can learn a lot of redundant stuff at school. I know I've been actually thinking a lot about about my school years recently, because I'm at an age where some of my school friends are actually starting to pass away. Really, really, I found out some sad news last week, and it just made me reflect on my school years and so many ridiculous, not ridiculous, but redundant subjects that weren't really exactly what you said, that I haven't really utilised since.
How did you focus on those other things, or did you literally just focus on his writing?
Oh no, basically whatever would emerge, like what would happen is that we'd use intuition. We'd go, well, what would you love to learn? And Joanna and Atlas, for a lot of the time, would tune in, and he'd go, and the theme of, he'd get a symbol of wolves, for instance. It's like, oh, I'd love to learn about wolves. And so then they would just steer the learning around that theme of wolves, where Joanna actually found out that there was a wolf park that he could go to, and he actually visited wolves. And there was a guy called Sean Ellis that spent time with wolves, and so they went and hung out with Sean. And then as a result of that, Atlas went, oh, I'd really love to have a dog, and so we got a dog, you know, and so he's learned so much about wolves over the years, you know, the nature of wolves, and because we have that flexibility, we can just do whatever we want to support that education, you know. Don't need a note from the parent to go on a school excursion. You just go.
Yeah, that sounds so beautiful. And your own journey of self-mastery, do you remember when that began?
Yeah, well, I think it actually began very young for me. I think self-mastery begins at kind of self-knowledge or self-discovery, you know, and I think the mastery comes a bit later. Self-discovery, self-knowledge, self-mastery. I think that's the path. But it actually began when I was 13. And it was when my stepfather died. And he was the only father that I knew from age 5 to 13. And from age 5 to 13, I was also a very devout Catholic. And when he died, and we didn't have a very good relationship, he was a very tortured. I have a lot more compassion for him now, but he was a very tortured man, and he was very violent, and so we didn't have a very good relationship as a result of that. I had quite a tough childhood as a result. But when he died, and because I was 13 too, I was just crossing that threshold and becoming a teenager, and I was starting to question Catholicism, and I started to find it somewhat hypocritical. And just him dying, it made me start to explore what happens after death. You know, is there really a heaven? Is there a hell? And then I started exploring other religions, particularly Hinduism and Buddhism, and it all unfolded from there, and started reading more and kind of going outside of the bubble of Catholicism. And it's amazing what unfolded, actually. Then I started exploring spiritualism, and it was amazing. I think that's when it really began, and it all unfolded from there. Yeah.
Yeah. I completely resonate with that exploration of all the different ones, and then coming to find your own truth within, definitely. And you mentioned earlier that someone from your school days passed away. Yeah, I'm sorry for your loss. You know, I have had some people pass away, and some of it's quite a shock. There was a very alive person in my life, and her image kept coming into my mind because I just couldn't imagine someone so alive. And as I'm on the precipice of the age of 49, coming to my 50th birthday in November, I resonate with that. And it can be quite an eye-opening one, I guess, because it really brings you to a place where you start to see life as more precious, and it opens up that you know, the nearing the end of kind of questioning. And I remember my mum saying at one point, you know, I don't want to go to any more funerals. and reaching that point. Yeah, yeah. But it does also, I think it inspires you to live. I think it really, well, has inspired me to live more. And like you said, with your beginning of your self-mastery journey, the passing away of your stepfather actually inspired you into a questioning of, what is this life? Why am I here? And I remember you saying that the quote, one of the quotes that you love is, above all else, know thyself.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fantastic.
Yeah. And that's really why I began the podcast as well, is about our journeys of, knowing ourselves, and maybe the deeper question is of who am I?
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I love that saying, because it comes from the Temple of Apollo in Delphi, where the Oracle of Delphi is famous for having that above her temple door, above all else know thyself. Replicated relatively recently by the Oracle in the Matrix. I don't know if you've seen the Matrix, but in the first Matrix film, in her kitchen, she's got that above her kitchen.
Yeah.
It's a real nod to Delphic Oracle.
Yeah.
And what I love about that, like when you ask the question, who am I? And that's what's so great about intuition, is that intuition reveals who we really are. It reveals that we are these magical divine beings, and it reveals our true nature. And it also reveals our persona and our identity, which I call our pretend self. And that's, I think ultimately that's why I love intuition, is because it really helps you know yourself and have that self-discovery and self-knowledge. And I think that's where mastery comes from, is that when you understand we've got these two aspects to ourselves. We've got our true and real self and our pretend self. We've just convinced ourselves that our pretend self is who we really are. And that's why we're often questioning, who am I? Well, that's not who you are. This is who you are, So, and that's another reason why I love intuition so much, because it's like, above all else, know thy true self and know thy pretend self, It's brilliant.
Yeah. And I remember part of, in the training as well, realizing that, if I'm nothing, there's almost in that exploration of who am I, there's well, maybe I am nothing, I'm everything and nothing, but then from everything and nothing comes anything, and then anything is possible.
That's true.
And
so true.
Another thing as well is really wielding the power of that focus. And I think you spoke about going over the bridge, and it's almost like the rainbow bridge, like we were speaking about rainbows this morning and how magical they are. I think because they're so ethereal, because they're so impermanent, and this magical sense of them, and that's like the focus as well. It can be very ethereal, it can be very impermanent, unless we stay focused on it. Like when you see a rainbow, you said this morning, you had to keep going back and looking at it, to keep it there, as it were.
And that's what I love about intuition, is that it reveals the vision of what we love. It can also help us reveal where we are in relationship to it and the assumptions that we have about whether it's possible or not. But then intuition does actually, when we go back to the vision reveals this rainbow bridge. I think I love the idea of that rainbow bridge that goes, well, this is, if you take this action, you'll cross the threshold into this magical world and you'll create the vision. And it's hardly ever rational. And it's interesting, there is like a window that's open. And then when you take that action while the rainbow is there, then it magically takes you to your treasure, which is the vision of what you love. But then, then the rainbow disappears, and then all the thoughts and feelings and assumptions can come back up again. But in terms of keeping the focus, it's impossible to always keep our focus on the vision, because it's just, we go into reaction. And that's what I love about intuition as well, because knowing that you can lower the volume on your thoughts and feelings and increase the volume on your intuition at any point in time, then you can part the veil, reconnect with the vision again, and then literally kind of re-engage the rainbow. It's amazing how it works.
Yeah. And would you say that some of when we were on the training, you spoke a little bit about Joseph Campbell and his work? Can you share how that weaves into your work?
Yeah, very much so, actually. Very much so. Like, there's a lot of synergy with what Joseph Campbell has done in kind of articulating the pathway of the hero's journey, because that's literally the pathway that we can go on to transform into who we really are. It also reveals how we created our identity and how we got lost believing that's who we are. And what intuition does is that it helps us, it speeds us on that transformative journey, and it kind of turns it from just kind of like a stereotypical journey to our own journey. I think that's what I love. I mean, I love what Joseph Campbell has done with the hero's journey. If anyone hasn't come across it before, I really recommend checking it out, because so many great books and films have drawn on the wisdom of his distillation. He's basically talking about discovering different forms of spirituality. He was a professor of mythology, and he studied comparative religion. And in studying all these different religions, he realized there was a common path of transformation that everyone went on. Different characters, but the same story. And that's why films that really resonate and impact a lot of people, like Star Wars or Lord of the Rings or The Matrix or Wizard of Oz or Pan's Labyrinth, or those kind of films, they're all built on the hero's journey. And Star Wars, the first Star Wars film in particular, because George Lucas actually collaborated directly with Joseph Campbell when he created that film. It wasn't, he'd written 3 plots to the film, and he didn't really have anything. And it wasn't until he met Joseph Campbell and he learned about the hero's journey that he introduced the Force, and he introduced, Jedi Knights, and that's what kind of gave it its magic, didn't it? He suddenly had a hero he could play with, he could go on a transformational journey.
I recently heard of some links within there to do with Egypt as well, and the mythology of Egypt. And I think films bring a lot of different messages through that when you watch them a second or third time as well, you often see a different layer to that movie. At the transformation, we actually watched a movie and decoded it, as it were.
Every weekend we watch a movie that was pretty much based on the hero's journey, but some were more built on that than others, that then we could track the hero's journey in that particular film.
Yeah.
But the first Matrix does that so well. The first Star Wars does it really well. If you want to see the phases done, impeccably. And that, like, it does draw on ancient Egypt as well, because that's also what he think. Because if you just look at the first thing of we all have a royalty. He says we all have a royalty and a greatness, and but we're wounded in relationship to that. We form an identity. But there's this whole thing of informing our identity. We have a kind of a father-child relationship we project onto our greatness. And that's where the sun, like if you think of the sun itself is symbolic of our greatness, and taking human form is us kind of projecting onto that. And so in ancient Egypt, you've got Ra as the sun and Horus as the kind of like, the human, but who goes on the journey of transformation in relationship to Ra. Jesus is the same, like God is the sun, and you have that relationship. If you look at Norse mythology, Thor is the equivalent to Horus, or the equivalent to Jesus, and Odin is like Ra or God. It's like that's the same dynamic playing out, depending on the mythology that you're working with.
And so,
and I can really relate to Joseph Campbell, actually, because remember watching a documentary of his life, because he was also a devout Catholic and started questioning it. He also did a lot of study of Native American spirituality as well, and then started exploring the different arts and everything, and music. And it's amazing. So it's kind of like it all kind of came together in a very similar way to how he kind of coalesced and brought his wisdom together. And what's interesting, he started teaching at Columbia University. Oh no, it wasn't Columbia, it was another one. It was an all-girls school that he was teaching. And then he ended up falling in love with one of his students. And I ended up falling in love with one of my students. It's like the parallels between my life and his are quite extraordinary, actually, and quite humbly.
So can you tell us more about the mystery school and what the mystery school involves?
Yeah, well, essentially, I would say the mystery school is like my own personal Hogwarts. Because Harry Potter is another great example of a hero's journey story. J.K. Rowling was a student of the hero's journey. And where, like Harry's living as a muggle, which is like our identity, not having a real sense of who he is. And then he goes on his hero's journey because what happens, the first thing is you have this call to adventure when all these invitations come. And then you encounter threshold guardians that try to stop you, and that's where the doubts and fears come in that you mentioned earlier. But then a herald comes along, which is like Hagrid, who gets you across the threshold, and then you meet the wise person. And then the wise person then reveals who you really are, and then invites you to go into training to learn the inherent skills and abilities that you have. Like Harry's inherent ability is magic because he's a wizard. And so he's not going to learn to be a wizard while he's under the stairs in Privet Lane in Surrey. But he becomes a wizard and he taps into that natural ability at Hogwarts. And so the mystery school is like my Hogwarts, where I serve people to tap into their natural ability, which is our imagination and intuition, because that comes pre-built in when we were born. And that's where I train people in to be able to master their imagination and intuition and to start learning from what I call principles or premises. Because we kind of live out of theories and assumptions for the most part that can be true some of the time. It's like a broken clock will tell the right time twice a day, but they're not often true most of the time. Whereas when you start learning to build your life on premises, then that becomes the foundation. And then that's what also serves you to transform into your greatness, because that's the last steps of the hero's journey. Is you go into training with the wise person to master this inherent ability. Then you face your demons, and when you die, and then you resurrect into your greatness. And we're always resurrected by the power of love. And essentially that's what the mystery school does. Because essentially what I do now is where we did the transformation together in a group of people. I work one-on-one with people now. I stopped running the transformation back in 2018, and I got this intuition that I'd love to spend more time at home in Devon with my family, and I'd love to start working one-on-one online with people. And that's how intuition serves us as well, because I did that and suddenly COVID came along, and had I still been running my trainings, they had just disappeared, I've already started to establish a footing for myself. And so the mystery school has come out of that, really. It's kind of taken everything that I've taught at the transformation and channeling it into a personal one-on-one online training for people.
Fantastic. I just want to go back to something that you said about the doubts and fears, because if people are thinking about the doubts and fears, they can also be not just in your own head, can't they? They can be played by naysayers around you, or perfectly lovely, supportive people, but then just they're bringing their own kind of doubts and fears up and voicing them to you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Joseph Campbell calls those people helpful friends and family.
How do we manage that?
Well, again, it all comes with being trained in your imagination and intuition, because one of the things that you learn is you learn to where thoughts and feelings come from. and where doubts and fears come from, and that they come from beliefs, and how beliefs form the foundation of our identity, and that we all have an identity. And so so there's that aspect of it. And then when your intuition is revealing what you love and you're going for it, you know that if you're going to encounter people who aren't trained in their imagination and intuition, who's still operating unconsciously from their beliefs and assumptions, that quite often when we're going for what we love, that's going to trigger their beliefs and assumptions. And so you don't take it personally. And you understand the relationship dynamic that can play out as well when people are leading with their beliefs. And so so you just end up becoming much more compassionate with people and not necessarily reacting to their projections. Because the thing about intuition as well, it gives you access to your own inner wisdom and also your own courage and conviction. And so you're able to connect with that courage and conviction over and above any doubts and fears others may have. And if anything, when you do that, these people who are threshold guardians can often become heralds. You can transform them into heralds. Like Joseph Campbell talks about threshold guardians be like demons with two faces. Like the one that's facing the identity is the face of a demon. But once you cross the threshold, their other face is the face of an angel.
I remember that. That's always stuck in my mind, how they can have those two faces. As I've been listening to you, it actually is very simple, and it takes practice and that deep listening to your intuition and acting upon it. Is there anything else that you'd like to share that would help people out there who are on this journey of deeper listening to their intuition?
Yeah, in terms of the practice, because it does take practice, and it's through that practice that's where the mastery comes. And the practice for me, it doesn't take a lot of effort. It's actually quite effortless. But the practice is learning what I call these premises that enable you to lower the volume on your thoughts and feelings and increase them. And then practice playing with each of those premises. For me, that's like a form of meditation. And it's something that I teach. I do regular webinars on how to master your intuitive wisdom. And in that webinar, I teach these premises that you can go through and then give people an experience of them. And for me, the practice is just the practice of going through each of these premises, knowing that they will always lower the volume on your thoughts and feelings and increase the volume on your intuition. But it's interesting, just to cross the threshold to do that. You know what I mean? Like even sometimes in the morning, I can be really tired. It's like, oh. But then just to go, okay, no, I'm going to take myself through the premises. And then it's the being on the other side, it's amazing how magical it is. And for me, it's just like, talk about practice. It's the same as with music. It's like if you want to be masterful at music and really enjoy music, it takes practice. But it's funnily enough, I apply these same premises to music as well. And so music practice is effortless and enjoyable as well. Some people can practice music and it can just be like pulling teeth. So it can be very joyful, that practice. And it's through that practice that we grow.
I will have that information about the webinars as well, so that people can tune into those if they would like to.
As well as running regular webinars, I'm also working one-on-one with people. So if anyone is interested and feels the call or this resonates, I'm also happy to do a one-on-one webinar with people. So it makes it more personal. I've been doing that with a few people lately, and it's worked really well to give you a really good kind of education in how to access your intuition purposely and to have that personal experience. And I also kind of go through how the hero's journey works and how to make it personal. And then from there, if people want to explore it further, then we do a one-on-one intuitive session where I give people a real insight into their greatness and a real insight into their identity and how they can go on their own transformative journey.
Tell us more about the greatness, someone's greatness.
Well, that to me is, that's our divinity, that I've been talking about. I say, above all else, know thyself and who you really are. And Joseph Campbell in The Hero's Journey calls it our royalty, which is a great symbol of our greatness and our divinity. Fortunately, we haven't actually been born into a royal family. I think I wouldn't wish that on anyone. But it's it's our royalty in the sense that if you look at our greatness, our royalty is symbolized by a crown, and a crown is golden, and gold's a symbol of alchemy and transformation, and it's worn on the head, which is symbolic of our crown chakra and our connection to the heavens. So that's kind of what our greatness is, and that's the great thing about intuition, is that our greatness can be revealed to us through intuition. In fact, that's the thing that I do in the webinar, is have intuition reveal that, and it reveals our natural states. Our natural state is that we're energetic beings. We're beings of love, connected to everything through space and time, actually. If you want to get onto the subject, we're literally gods. People can go gods, but we are. Like all the gods that in the pantheon of Mount Olympus in Greece, that's all symbolic of us. They're all archetypes of our own divinity, regardless of what kind of mythology you're working with. And that's the thing about, I was talking about Ra and Horus, like. Ra is just symbolic of, is alive in Horus, like that divinity is within him. It's the same with Jesus and God, it's the same with us. So that's kind of a little summary of how I would define greatness. Definitely
resonate with that we are God and we're not God. And the quote that I always come to, which it's a Rumi quote, but it's a little bit different from the way he says it, is that we are one drop in the ocean, and we are the ocean in one drop.
Beautiful. There's so much wisdom in Sufism, isn't there? Like Rumi's wisdom. One of the things that I love about Sufism, and Rumi does it beautifully, where they talk about the beloved, and that divine beloved is out there, but it's also in us. Yeah. And being lost in the beloved. Yes.
So apart from your music, obviously, and your intuition, is there anything else that is lighting you up at the moment in your life?
Yeah, well, I'm a really simple person. And the only other thing that lights me up is my family. I love Joanna and Atlas, and serving them and just enjoying them as well. The fact that Atlas is about to go to London next week as a result of being shortlisted for this writing prize, it just makes me so happy that to be there to hold that space for him and to love him. But I just have a really simple life, really, just a few things that I love, and I spend a lot of time loving my family, loving music. I'm also, as well as running the mystery school, I'm also collaborating with a musician in Melbourne who has a music school, and we're doing workshops on music and imagination, combining music with imagination. The results we're getting are phenomenal, like people tapping into their natural ability with music, and really connecting with their love for music. It's amazing.
We'll have to share more on that, because I'm sure I'm intrigued, so I'm sure there's more of our audience out there that are intrigued about that journey as well.
Yeah, very happy to talk about that specific creation. It's extraordinary what we're creating for people. Yeah, because there's something about music and imagination just go together so well, because they bring love to life so beautifully. Like, music is on the vibration of love, because I think they've written a few songs about love.
Just a few.
And imagination is on the vibration of love, and we're beings of love, so they just go together so beautifully. Yeah. Exquisite.
So is there one final message that you would like to leave our audience with, maybe a bit of advice for their self-mastery journey?
Yeah, I think, it's like I said at the top, that for me, it's all about intuition. And if you can start going down the path of accessing and mastering your own intuitive ability, it will be the greatest gift you can give yourself. It really has been the greatest gift, because prior to learning my intuition, I'd spent 14 years doing all sorts of personal and spiritual development. But I was always looking outside of myself, whereas intuition started making me look, not making me, but serving me to look inside myself. And that's just been so enriching. So if there's one thing is develop your intuitive ability. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Darren.
Very welcome.
It's been wonderful to have you on the podcast, and look forward to finding out more about your imagination and music project as well.
Yeah, very happy to share that with you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me on.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Soulful Sauna podcast. We appreciate your continued support. Feel free to leave us a rating, share with your family, friends, and loved ones. I have a question to leave you with. What inspired you from today's podcast, and what actions are you going to take as a result? Time to tell your own story of self-mastery.